Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway of Building 7 at Fort McAllister, just like she did every Tuesday morning. The wheels squeaked on the polished floor. Her gray uniform was clean but worn. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun. To anyone who passed her, she was invisible. Just the janitor. Fort McAllister sat outside Savannah, Georgia, a mid-sized military base that handled logistics and intelligence operations. It wasn't the biggest or most famous base, but important work happened here. Work that Maria cleaned up after every day. "Excuse me," a young lieutenant said, not looking at her as he walked past. He was carrying classified files and talking on his phone, forcing Maria to move her cart against the wall to let him pass. He didn't say thank you. He barely acknowledged she existed. Maria was used to it. After 3 years working as a janitor at Fort McAllister, she had learned that most people looked right through her. To them, she wasn't a person with a story or a past. She was just part of the furniture, there to empty trash cans and mop floors. "Hey, cleaning lady," a voice called from the break room. Sergeant Derek Miller stood in the doorway holding a coffee cup. "Someone spilled coffee in here. You need to clean it up before it stains." Maria nodded and guided her cart toward the break room. Sergeant Miller didn't move out of her way. He stood there, making her squeeze past him. "You know," he said, "my wife is looking for a housekeeper. You interested? Probably pays better than this." "No, thank you," Maria said quietly. Her English had only a slight accent, though most people assumed she barely spoke the language. "Suit yourself," Miller said with a shrug, "though I don't know why anyone would want to clean toilets for the military." He walked away, leaving Maria to clean the spilled coffee. She knelt down with her cloth and wiped up the dark liquid, her face showing no emotion. But inside, Maria felt the familiar sting. 3 years of this. 3 years of being invisible, dismissed, sometimes mocked. 3 years of people assuming she was uneducated, unskilled, worthy only of cleaning up their messes. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that Maria Santos had once been Captain Maria Santos, U.S. Army Intelligence. They didn't know she spoke 5 languages fluently. They didn't know she had spent 8 years doing classified work in some of the most dangerous places in the world. They didn't know because she couldn't tell them. After cleaning the break room, Maria continued her rounds. She emptied trash cans in offices where officers discussed troop movements and supply chains. She mopped floors in conference rooms where classified briefings took place. She cleaned windows that looked out over the base's communications center. People talked around her like she wasn't there. They discussed sensitive information, made jokes, complained about their commanders. They never thought twice about the quiet janitor in the corner. Which was exactly the point. At noon, Maria took her lunch break in the janitor's closet on the 3rd floor. It was a small space, barely big enough for her cleaning supplies and a folding chair, but it was private. She sat down and unwrapped the sandwich she'd brought from home. The door opened suddenly. Tom Bradley, the head of facilities management, stuck his head in. He was a civilian contractor in his 60s, and unlike most people on base, he was kind to Maria. "Maria, there you are," Tom said. "Listen, I need you to work late tonight. We've got a big meeting in conference room tomorrow morning. General's orders, everything needs to be spotless." "What time?" Maria asked. "Can you stay until 9? I know it's late, but they're paying overtime." Maria nodded. "That's fine, Tom." "You're a lifesaver," Tom said with a genuine smile. "I don't know what I'd do without you, most reliable worker I've got." After Tom left, Maria finished her sandwich and allowed herself a small smile. Tom was one of the few people who treated her like a human being. He didn't know her past either, but he respected her present. That evening, as the base emptied out and most personnel went home, Maria continued working. The hallways grew quiet. Lights were dimmed in empty offices. Only security personnel and a few officers working late remained. Maria cleaned conference room thoroughly, just as Tom had requested. She vacuumed the carpet, polished the long wooden table, cleaned the windows, and made sure every chair was positioned correctly. She was finishing up around 8:30 when she heard voices in the hallway, male voices speaking quickly and urgently. Maria recognized one of them, Colonel Richard Chen, the base's deputy commander. She'd seen him many times but had never spoken to him. The other voice was unfamiliar, younger, stressed. Maria quietly pushed her cart toward the door, preparing to leave and give them privacy. But as she reached the hallway, she heard Colonel Chen speaking, and her entire body went still. He wasn't speaking English. Colonel Chen was speaking Mandarin Chinese, his words rapid and forceful. He was giving orders to the younger officer, something about securing a location and checking communications. Maria understood every word. Her hands gripped the handle of her cleaning cart. She forced herself to keep moving, to walk past the two officers as if she hadn't heard anything unusual, as if she was just the janitor leaving for the night. But her mind was racing. Colonel Chen shouldn't be speaking Mandarin with another officer in the hallway where anyone might hear. Not unless it was something he didn't want others to understand. Not unless he was trying to keep it secret. Maria had been trained to spot irregularities. She'd spent years in intelligence, learning to notice the details that didn't fit, and this didn't fit. She pushed her cart to the supply closet and put her things away, her movements automatic while her brain processed what she'd heard. She clocked out, said goodnight to the security guard at the entrance, and walked to her beat-up Honda in the parking lot. But instead of driving home to her small apartment in Savannah, Maria sat in her car and thought. Colonel Chen was a respected officer with a distinguished service record. There could be innocent reasons for him speaking Mandarin with another officer. Maybe they were practicing. Maybe they were discussing something personal. Or maybe it was something else. Maria knew she should let it go. She wasn't Captain Santos anymore. She was just Maria the janitor, invisible and unimportant. She'd given up her career, her rank, her identity 3 years ago for reasons that still kept her awake at night. She'd promised herself she was done with that life. But old instincts don't die easily. Maria started her car and drove home. But that night, she barely slept. She kept hearing Colonel Chen's Mandarin words in her mind, kept analyzing the tone, the urgency, the secrecy of it. The next morning, Maria arrived at Fort McAllister at 6 a.m., same as always. She changed into her gray uniform, got her cleaning cart, and started her rounds. But now she was paying attention in a different way. Watching, listening, using skills she'd thought she'd left behind. Because something at Fort McAllister wasn't right. And Maria Santos, invisible janitor, was one of the few people who might notice. She just didn't know yet that within 24 hours, she would have to make a choice between staying invisible and saving lives. A choice that would expose everything she'd been hiding. Maria spent the next day moving through Fort McAllister with heightened awareness. She cleaned offices and listened to conversations. She emptied trash cans and noticed which documents people threw away. She mopped floors and observed who met with whom. To everyone else, she was the same quiet janitor she'd always been. But Maria was seeing the base through different eyes now, using training she'd tried to forget. She saw Colonel Chen twice that day. Both times, he was with the same young officer from the night before, a Captain James Warren, according to the nameplate on his office door. Maria made a note of it. She also noticed that Colonel Chen seemed tense, distracted. He snapped at a secretary who asked him a question. He spent unusual amounts of time in his office with the door closed. None of this would mean anything to a casual observer, but Maria had been trained to see patterns, and a pattern was emerging. That afternoon, Maria was cleaning the bathroom near the communications center when she overheard two technicians talking by the water cooler. "Did you hear about the system glitch last night?" one of them was saying. "Yeah, someone said we were offline for almost 30 minutes. That's not supposed to happen. Everything checked out when we ran diagnostics this morning. No idea what caused it." "Weird, right?" The technicians walked away, and Maria continued scrubbing the sink, but her mind was working. A communications blackout, Colonel Chen speaking secretly in Mandarin, his unusual behavior today. Individually, these things meant nothing. Together, they formed a picture Maria didn't like. She needed more information, but how could she get it? She was just a janitor. She had no access to classified systems, no authority to ask questions, no reason to be anywhere near sensitive information. Except that people talked around her like she was invisible. That evening, as Maria was cleaning the executive offices on the 3rd floor, she saw Colonel Chen leave his office in a hurry. He was carrying a briefcase and looked upset. He didn't even glance at Maria as he rushed past. Maria waited a few minutes, then pushed her cart toward the colonel's office. The door was closed but not locked. She knocked gently. No answer. Maria knew she shouldn't. She knew this crossed a line. But she also knew that something was wrong and her instincts were screaming at her to find out what. She opened the door and slipped inside with her cleaning supplies. Colonel Chen's office was neat and organized, with citations on the walls and family photos on his desk. Maria quickly wiped down surfaces, providing herself with a cover story if anyone walked in. But while she cleaned, her eyes scanned the room. She saw nothing obviously suspicious until she noticed the trash can beside his desk. Inside were several crumpled pieces of paper. Maria knew she shouldn't, but she reached into the trash can and pulled out one of the papers, smoothing it out. It was covered in numbers, coordinates maybe, or codes. She couldn't be sure without more time to analyze them. But at the top of the page, written in Colonel Chen's handwriting, were 3 letters, CCP. Chinese Communist Party. Maria's blood ran cold. She quickly took out her phone and snapped a photo of the paper, then crumpled it again and threw it back in the trash. She finished cleaning the office as quickly as she could and left. Back in the janitor's closet, Maria sat on her folding chair and stared at the photo on her phone. She felt sick. Colonel Chen might be passing information to Chinese intelligence. That's what this looked like. The secret Mandarin conversations, the communications blackout, the codes, the CCP notation. If she was right, this was serious, treasonous. Colonel Chen had access to classified information about military logistics, supply chains, and operations. If he was compromised, countless lives could be at risk. But Maria had no proof, just a crumpled paper from a trash can and overheard conversations. No one would believe her. Why would they? She was just a janitor. More than that, if she reported this, people would ask questions. How did she know Mandarin? Why was she looking in trash cans? What was her background? And Maria couldn't answer those questions, not without revealing the truth about who she really was. 3 years ago, Captain Maria Santos had been one of the Army's top intelligence officers. She'd worked undercover in China for 2 years, gathering information on military capabilities and strategic planning. She'd learned Mandarin so well that she could pass for a native speaker. She'd risked her life repeatedly for her country. Then her cover had been blown. Chinese intelligence had identified her, and she'd barely escaped with her life. 2 of her contacts, brave Chinese citizens who'd helped her, had been arrested. They had probably been executed, though Maria never received confirmation. She'd come home traumatized and guilt-ridden. The nightmares had been unbearable. The therapy had helped, but not enough. She couldn't go back to intelligence work, couldn't handle the stress and the fear and the weight of responsibility. So she'd resigned her commission and disappeared. The Army had helped her create a new identity, standard procedure for former undercover operatives. She'd become Maria Santos, ordinary citizen. She'd gotten a job as a janitor at Fort McAllister because she still wanted to serve somehow, even if it was just keeping the base clean. For 3 years, she'd been invisible, safe, trying to heal. Now that safety was being threatened by her own conscience. Maria knew what she should do, report her suspicions through proper channels. But that would expose her, drag her back into a world she'd tried to leave behind. She sat in the janitor's closet for a long time, wrestling with the decision. Finally, she pulled out a phone she kept hidden in her locker. Not her regular phone, but a secure one she'd been given when she left the service. She'd been told to use it only in absolute emergencies, to contact only one person. Her former handler, Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Reeves. Maria stared at the phone for a full minute before she dialed. The call was answered on the second ring. "This is Reeves." "It's Maria Santos," Maria said quietly. "I need to talk to you, it's urgent." There was a pause. "Are you secure?" "Yes." "Go ahead." Maria told her everything. The Mandarin conversation, the communications blackout, the paper in the trash, her suspicions about Colonel Chen. When she finished, Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maria, you know we've been monitoring concerns about Colonel Chen for 3 months." Maria's eyes widened. "What?" "We suspected he might be compromised, but we haven't had enough evidence. We've been running a quiet investigation. But if what you're saying is accurate, he may be accelerating his timeline. We might not have much time." "What do you need from me?" Maria asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "We need you to get close to him. Use your access as a janitor. Find out what he's planning, and when, you're in the perfect position to observe without raising suspicion." I can't, Maria said. I'm not that person anymore, I'm just— You're never just anything, Maria, Reeves said firmly. You're one of the best intelligence officers this country has ever had. I know you're scared. I know what happened in China still haunts you. But right now, you might be the only person who can stop whatever Colonel Chen is planning. Maria closed her eyes. She thought about the soldiers on this base, the young lieutenants and sergeants who had no idea they might be in danger, even Sergeant Miller, who'd been rude to her, and all the others who looked right through her. They were still her people, still soldiers she'd sworn to protect. What do you want me to do? Maria asked quietly. Over the next 20 minutes, Reeves gave her instructions. Maria would continue her normal routine but would pay special attention to Colonel Chen and Captain Warren. She would document anything suspicious. She would look for specific indicators that Reeves outlined. And she would be ready for whatever came next. After the call ended, Maria sat in the dark closet, her hands shaking slightly. 3 years of peace and anonymity gone, she was being pulled back into the world of secrets and danger. But she'd made her choice. The next morning, Maria arrived at Fort McAllister with a new purpose. She was still the invisible janitor. But now she was also Captain Maria Santos again, working undercover in plain sight. By the end of the day, she would witness something that would force her to reveal exactly who she was. And it would happen in the most dramatic way possible. Thursday started like any other day. Maria cleaned offices, emptied trash, and moved invisibly through the base. But now she was watching Colonel Chen carefully, documenting his movements, noting who he met with. She saw him enter a restricted area of the communications center at 10 a.m. She saw him leave 20 minutes later, looking satisfied. She saw him meet Captain Warren in an empty conference room and hand him a flash drive. Maria reported everything to Reeves, using the secure phone during her lunch break. Good work, Reeves said. We're getting closer to having enough for an arrest. Just keep watching, don't engage directly. Understood, Maria said. That afternoon, Maria was cleaning the hallway outside the base commander's office when she heard raised voices inside. One belonged to the commander, General Frank Morrison. The other was Colonel Chen. I'm telling you, sir, the supply route changes need to happen tomorrow, Colonel Chen was saying. We've received intelligence about a potential security threat. What intelligence? General Morrison asked. I haven't seen any reports. It came through classified channels, sir. I can brief you privately. Fine, my office, 1600 hours. Bring everything you have. Yes, sir. Maria's heart raced. Supply route changes based on classified intelligence that the general hadn't seen? This could be it. This could be how Colonel Chen was planning to cause damage, by rerouting supplies into an ambush or into the hands of enemy agents. She immediately found a private corner and called Reeves. We need to move now, Reeves said after hearing the news. Maria, I'm bringing in a team. We'll be there within 2 hours, but I need you to do something difficult. What? At 1600 hours, when Colonel Chen briefs the general, I need you to be nearby. If he shows the general false intelligence or manipulates the situation, we need someone on the inside who can verify what's said. I'm a janitor, Maria said. I can't just walk into the general's office. Find a way, Reeves said. You always do. At 3:30 p.m., Maria positioned her cleaning cart outside General Morrison's office. His secretary, a corporal named Davis, looked up from her desk. Can I help you? Davis asked. I'm here to clean the general's office, Maria said in her quiet voice. He has a meeting at 4. You'll need to come back later. I was told to do it now, Maria said, making her voice even smaller, more apologetic. My supervisor said it must be done before tomorrow. Big inspection. Davis sighed. Fine, be quick, and you need to be gone before the meeting starts. Yes, ma'am, thank you. Maria entered the general's office and began cleaning, working slowly and methodically. She dusted shelves, wiped down the desk, organized papers that didn't need organizing. She made herself as invisible as possible while positioning herself near a large bookshelf where she could hide if necessary. At 3:55, Davis stuck her head in. You need to leave now. Almost finished, Maria said, moving to the windows. Now, Davis said more firmly. Maria nodded and pushed her cart toward the door. But as she left, she propped the door open slightly with a small wedge she'd placed under the edge of her cart. a trick she'd learned in her intelligence days. It looked closed but wasn't fully latched. She moved her cart a short distance down the hall and pretended to clean, waiting. At 4 p.m., Colonel Chen arrived. He nodded to Davis and entered the general's office, closing the door behind him, or thinking he did. The wedge held. Maria waited 2 minutes, then quietly approached the door. She could hear voices inside. She knew this was dangerous. If she was caught, she'd have no good explanation. But Reeves needed someone inside, and Maria was the only option. She slipped through the door and quickly moved behind the large bookshelf in the corner of the room. It was tall and deep, creating a hidden space where she could crouch unseen. From here, she could hear everything. "Thank you for seeing me, General," Colonel Chen was saying. "Let's make this quick, Richard. What's this intelligence about the supply routes?" "Sir, I've received information from a trusted source that there may be an attack planned on our convoy to Fort Stewart tomorrow. I recommend we change the route and timing immediately." "Show me the intelligence report." There was a pause. "It's verbal intelligence, sir, from a source I can't reveal, but I trust it completely." "Verbal?" General Morrison's voice sharpened. "Colonel, we don't change major supply operations based on verbal intelligence from unnamed sources. You know that." "Sir, I understand, but the risk." "Who is this source?" Another pause. "I'm not at liberty to say, sir." Maria's muscles tensed. Colonel Chen was trying to manipulate the general into changing the supply route without providing evidence. This was it, the moment when he would betray his country. "Colonel Chen, I'm going to need more than your word on this," the general said. "If there's a credible threat, show me documentation. Otherwise, the convoy runs as scheduled." "Sir, if you don't authorize this change, American lives will be at risk," Colonel Chen said, his voice taking on an urgent edge. "Then give me a good reason to believe that," General Morrison said firmly. Maria saw Colonel Chen's shadow shift. His voice changed, became harder. "Sir, I'm telling you as your deputy commander." Suddenly, the door burst open. Captain Warren rushed in, looking panicked. "Colonel Chen, we have a problem," Warren said in Mandarin, forgetting himself in his panic. "They know. Security is at your office right now." Colonel Chen responded in rapid Mandarin. "How much time do we have?" "Minutes, maybe less. We need to leave now." General Morrison stood up. "What the hell is going on? Colonel, why are you speaking Chinese?" Colonel Chen's face hardened. In one smooth motion, he pulled a pistol from inside his jacket. "I'm sorry, General," he said in English. "I didn't want it to happen this way." General Morrison raised his hand slowly. "Richard, put the gun down. Whatever's happening, we can work through it." "No, we can't," Colonel Chen said. "Captain Warren, secure the door." Warren pulled out his own weapon and moved toward the door. Maria's mind raced. She was unarmed, hidden, and watching 2 armed traitors take the base commander hostage. Colonel Chen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, keeping his gun trained on the general. "Security is searching the building. We're out of time." He looked at the general. "You're coming with us. You're our way off this base." "You won't make it," General Morrison said calmly. "Security will stop you at the gate." "Not if we have you," Colonel Chen said. "Warren, find something to restrain him." Captain Warren started looking around the office for rope or zip ties. His search brought him closer to the bookshelf where Maria was hiding. Maria knew she had seconds to decide. She could stay hidden, stay safe, and hope that Reeves and her team would arrive in time to save the general. Or she could act now, while she still had the element of surprise. She thought of the soldiers on this base. She thought of her oath. She thought of who she really was beneath the gray janitor's uniform. Captain Warren stepped around the bookshelf, and Maria moved. She grabbed him from behind, using a defensive technique she'd practiced 1,000 times. She pulled him off balance and twisted his gun hand sharply. The weapon clattered to the floor. Warren shouted in surprise. Colonel Chen spun toward the commotion, his gun swinging away from the general. It was the opening Morrison needed. The general, a combat veteran himself, launched himself at Colonel Chen, grabbing for the weapon. Maria released Warren and dove for his dropped pistol. She came up with it, pointing it at Warren as he scrambled to his feet. "Don't move," she said in perfect, commanding English. Not the quiet voice of the janitor, but the authoritative voice of a military officer. Warren froze, staring at her in confusion. "Who the hell are you?" Behind them, General Morrison and Colonel Chen were struggling for control of Chen's weapon. Morrison was older but larger, using his weight to force Chen against the desk. "General down," Maria shouted. Morrison immediately dropped to the floor. Colonel Chen, suddenly alone and exposed, found himself looking at Maria and the gun in her steady hands. "Drop the weapon, Colonel," Maria said. For a moment, Chen looked like he might fight. Then he saw the absolute certainty in Maria's eyes and let his gun fall to the floor. The office door burst open. Security personnel flooded in, weapons drawn. Behind them came Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, her face showing relief when she saw Maria standing with a gun on the two traitors. "Secure these two," Reeves ordered, pointing at Chen and Warren. As security handcuffed the traitors, General Morrison stood up, breathing hard. He looked at Maria with complete bewilderment. "Someone want to tell me what just happened," he said. "Who is this woman?" Reeves looked at Maria and nodded slightly. Maria lowered the weapon and met the general's eyes. "Sir," she said quietly, "my name is Captain Maria Santos, U.S. Army Intelligence. I've been working undercover on this base for 3 years." The general's eyes widened. You're the janitor." "Yes, sir, and no, sir." As security led Colonel Chen and Captain Warren away, Chen looked back at Maria. In Mandarin, he said, "I should have known. You were too quiet, too invisible. Only intelligence officers disappear that well." Maria replied in equally fluent Mandarin, "You should have remembered that even janitors can serve their country." Colonel Chen's face twisted with anger and resignation as he was led away. General Morrison stared at Maria. "Captain Santos, I think you and I need to have a very long conversation." "Yes, sir," Maria said. "I think we do." The debriefing lasted 3 hours. Maria sat in a secure conference room with General Morrison, Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, and several other high-ranking officers from military intelligence. She told them everything: her years as an undercover operative in China, her blown cover and traumatic escape, her decision to resign and take a job as a janitor at Fort McAllister, partly to heal and partly because even undercover operatives need a retirement cover story that could be monitored. "So you've been under our noses this whole time," General Morrison said, shaking his head in amazement. 3 years. "Yes, sir," Maria said. "I wasn't supposed to be active. I was just supposed to be, recovering, living a quiet life." "Until Colonel Chen forced your hand," Reeves said. "Yes, ma'am." The investigation into Colonel Chen and Captain Warren revealed the scope of their betrayal. Chen had been recruited by Chinese intelligence 5 years earlier during a diplomatic visit to Beijing. They'd promised him money and a comfortable retirement in exchange for information on U.S. military logistics and supply chains. Warren had been drawn in more recently, seduced by ideology and promises of helping create a better world order. The supply route change Chen had tried to implement would have directed a convoy carrying advanced communications equipment into an ambush zone, where Chinese operatives were waiting to seize the technology. "You stopped a major intelligence breach," General Morrison told Maria. "If they'd gotten that equipment, it would have compromised our communications across multiple theaters." "I just did what needed to be done, sir," Maria said. After the debriefing, Maria was told to go home and rest. "We'll be in touch soon about your status," Reeves said. Maria drove back to her small apartment in Savannah, her mind spinning. Her cover was blown. Everyone at Fort McAllister would know by tomorrow that the quiet janitor was actually an intelligence officer. Her 3 years of invisibility were over. She didn't know if she felt relieved or sad, maybe both. The next morning, Maria's phone rang early. It was Tom Bradley, her facility's supervisor. "Maria, you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "I heard some crazy stories about what happened yesterday." "I'm fine, Tom, and the stories are probably true." "So you're really some kind of spy?" Maria said. "I'm retired from that, or I was trying to be." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Well, whoever you are, you're still the best worker I ever had. That hasn't changed." After the call, Maria smiled. Tom was a good man. Later that morning, Reeves called. "Maria, can you come to the base? General Morrison wants to see you." Maria arrived at Fort McAllister expecting stares and whispers. She got them. Soldiers who had walked past her for 3 years now looked at her with amazement and curiosity. A few even saluted, unsure of her rank or status. She met with General Morrison in his office. He gestured for her to sit. "Captain Santos," he said, "I've spent the morning reviewing your service record, your real service record. It's remarkable." "Thank you, sir. You were one of our most valuable intelligence assets. You gathered information that shaped policy at the highest levels, and then you walked away." "I had to, sir, after what happened in China." Morrison nodded. "I read the report. You lost people, good people who trusted you. That's a heavy burden." "Yes, sir." "But you're not broken, Captain. What you did yesterday proved that. When the moment came, you acted with courage and skill. You saved my life and stopped a serious security breach." Maria didn't know what to say to that. Morrison leaned forward. "I want you to know you have options. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves has requested that you return to active intelligence work. She says you're too valuable to waste. But I understand if that's not what you want." "What are my other options, sir?" "You could stay here at Fort McAllister in your current role if that's what you prefer. Or," he paused, "I could use someone like you on my staff, someone with your skills and experience, not undercover but as a legitimate intelligence advisor. You'd have a rank, an office, full recognition for who you are and what you've done." Maria looked at him in surprise. "You're offering me a position." "I'm offering you a choice," Morrison said. "The question is, what do you want, Captain Santos?" Maria thought about it. She thought about the janitor's closet where she'd hidden for 3 years. She thought about being invisible, dismissed, looked through. She thought about the safety of it, the peace. But she also thought about yesterday, about the moment when she'd stepped out from behind that bookshelf and become herself again. She'd felt alive in that moment, useful, like she was finally doing what she was meant to do. "Sir," Maria said slowly, "I think I've been hiding long enough." Morrison smiled. "Welcome back to active duty, Captain." Over the next week, the news spread throughout Fort McAllister and beyond. The story of the janitor, who was secretly a decorated intelligence officer, became legend. News media requested interviews, which Maria declined. But within the military community, her name carried new respect. On her first day as the general's intelligence advisor, Maria walked through the base in her uniform for the first time in 3 years. People stood a little straighter when they saw her. They saluted respectfully. She passed Sergeant Derek Miller in the hallway, the same man who had asked if she wanted to clean his house. He stopped and stared, his face red with embarrassment. "Captain Santos," he said stiffly, "I owe you an apology, the things I said to you." Maria looked at him. "You said those things because you thought I was just a janitor. Maybe you should think about why you felt it was okay to disrespect anyone, regardless of their job." Miller swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am, you're right, I'm sorry." Maria nodded and continued walking. She felt no triumph in his embarrassment, just a quiet satisfaction that maybe he'd learned something. Later that day, Maria was reviewing intelligence reports in her new office when Lieutenant Colonel Reeves stopped by. "How does it feel to be back?" Reeves asked. "Strange," Maria admitted. "Good, but strange. I got used to being invisible." "You were never invisible to me," Reeves said. "I checked on you every month, made sure you were safe, made sure you were healing. I knew that eventually you'd find your way back." "Did you know about Colonel Chen when you placed me here?" Maria asked suddenly. Reeves smiled slightly. "We had suspicions about a possible mole somewhere in the logistics command. Fort McAllister was one of several bases we were quietly monitoring. Your being here as a deep cover asset was convenient. So I was never really retired." "You were retired from active operations," Reeves said. "What you did with Colonel Chen was your choice. You could have stayed hidden. Instead, you stepped up. That's who you are, Maria. That's who you've always been." After Reeves left, Maria sat in her office and looked at the framed photo on her desk, the same one that had been in her apartment, showing her younger self with her unit in China. She'd carried guilt about that mission for 3 years. The contacts she'd lost, the people who'd trusted her and died. She'd thought hiding as a janitor would help her forget, help her heal. But healing didn't come from hiding. It came from accepting who you were and moving forward. Maria was a soldier, an intelligence officer, someone who stepped up when her country needed her, regardless of the cost. She tried to be invisible, but when the moment came, when she heard Colonel Chen shouting in Mandarin and knew what it meant, She'd responded with her heart. Because some knowledge isn't learned, it's lived. And some identities can't be cleaned away, no matter how many floors you mop. 3 months later, Maria stood in front of a room full of new intelligence recruits at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. General Morrison had recommended her for an instructor position, and she accepted. "My name is Captain Maria Santos," she told the young soldiers. "Some of you may have heard stories about me. Let me tell you the real story." She told them about her years undercover. She told them about losing people she cared about. She told them about running away and trying to hide. And she told them about finding herself again in the moment when she was needed most. "You're going to face hard choices in this career," Maria said. "You're going to want to quit sometimes. You're going to question whether the sacrifices are worth it. And maybe sometimes they won't be. But I can tell you this, when the moment comes when someone needs you, when your country needs you, that's when you'll find out who you really are." She looked at their young faces, so eager and uncertain. "You might spend years invisible, underestimated, dismissed. People might look right through you and never see your value. But don't let that change who you are inside. Don't let that make you forget your training, your oath, your purpose." Maria smiled. Because the colonel's shout might come in a foreign code, but if you know the reply by heart, if you've lived it and breathed it and made it part of who you are, then you'll answer. And that answer might save lives. After the class, a young female recruit approached Maria shyly. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, thank you. I've been feeling like maybe I don't belong here, like maybe I'm not strong enough or smart enough, but your story gives me hope." Maria looked at the young woman and saw herself years ago, uncertain but determined, scared but brave. "You belong here," Maria said firmly. "Don't let anyone tell you different. And remember, strength isn't about being loud or obvious. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones nobody notices until the moment they're needed most." The recruit smiled and saluted. Maria returned the salute, watching the young woman walk away with her head held higher. That evening, Maria called Tom Bradley, her old supervisor from Fort McAllister. "How's the janitorial staff doing without me?" she asked with a smile. Tom laughed. "Not as good as when you were here. I keep telling people, I don't care if you're a spy or a general or the president, you knew how to clean a floor properly." They talked for a while, and before hanging up, Tom said, "Maria, I'm proud of you for everything you've done, but also for being willing to be invisible for 3 years. That took a different kind of courage." After the call, Maria sat on her porch at her new quarters in Arizona, watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. She'd been a spy, she'd been a janitor. Now she was an instructor teaching the next generation of intelligence officers. But through it all, she'd been the same person, a soldier who served her country in whatever way was needed, whether that was gathering secrets in hostile territory or mopping floors on a military base. The uniform changed, the rank changed, the visibility changed. But the heart stayed the same. And when the colonel's shout came in a foreign code, Maria Santos had known the reply by heart. Because some things run deeper than disguise. Some commitments outlast any cover story. And some soldiers never really stop serving, no matter how invisible they become. Maria smiled and went inside, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Ready to serve, ready to teach, ready to be exactly who she was meant to be. Finally visible, finally home,